Pigeon lands on a pile of snow. Am I here just to notice how high contrast? When I recycle, where does it go? Am I supposed to believe waste is a problem of the past? Hop on a plane because a train is too slow. Is the impact worth just getting there fast? I call that poem, can you rephrase that question?
Oh.
Thank you.
I like that you came up with a title for it.
Of course.
Should that be the title of the episode also?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's very vague.
Essentially, the title is because the poem is the 3 questions we asked for this week, rephrased in a poetic manner. So the 3 topics we're going to be talking about on this week's episode of the Nature series are ecotourism, waste management and recycling, and of course, what is the meaning of life?
Yeah, I like that question because it's really in line with the usual things that we discuss on Solacene. We have like designing the Solacene cinema. Mm-hmm. What would be some wonders of the world? What's the purpose of our species?
Yes.
It's natural for us to discuss.
Of course.
We are experts on the subject.
Philosophically and, dare I say, theologically, we're both quite enlightened when it comes to the meaning of humans.
Yeah.
So, what is the purpose of, let's say, the human race?
Well, maybe let's kind of contextualize the question and say, why are we asking and answering it in the nature semester?
That's a good question. It stems from conversations about stewardship. What is the human's role in nature? Like, are we helpful? Are we a hindrance? And I believe that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like looking to nature is a good way to answer this question. You can't really talk about what's our purpose in isolation from our existence in this broader biosphere.
Well said. So we are like kind of a hindrance, right? Mm-hmm. As in nature works very well without human involvement. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I've never actually considered this question before. Like I've genuinely never pondered the reason for existence, either like individual in like an existential crisis, like what's this all for, or on a species level, as we're talking about today. But really it underpins pretty much every conversation of economics, politics, the type of things that we do usually touch on in Solacene, are kind of, this is fundamental to them. Mm-hmm. Like, what are those things other than just extensions of your answer to this question, basically? It's like you want to restructure economics a certain way because you think that humans should do this. The question is basically like, so what should we do? You know, like, what should we do?
Yeah, exactly. And there's definitely a difference between the human race as a whole versus the individual. I feel like
do you think
people in their life come to what's my purpose?
Yes.
And that can be a lot more specific than what's humankind's purpose.
But don't you think it can be kind of extrapolated?
Yeah.
Like, let's say someone comes to their purpose and it's like, I want to win the World Cup. Very topical. Today, World Cup final. A lovely, lovely game. But let's say that's someone's goal. It's like that doesn't mean that they think every human's goal should be sport related or soccer related. That just means that their goal is about
achieving something
higher. And so they think that should be everybody's goal. Everybody should set a goal and strive for that.
Yeah.
Which is like, that sounds so broad, but really there's a lot of theses about how to live that are outside of that. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. I'd say the most common one is something to do with love, divine, and interpersonal.
Something to do with that, yeah.
Yes. So I feel like the foundation of most theories on like why humans exist is to love and be loved, I suppose. And when we look at nature, it has to do with the fact that no other species are really like capable of love on the level that humans are. That's kind of what distinguished us from them. Therefore, it's often seen as our purpose. So it's like, why are we endowed with this capacity to do something that most other species aren't? And love isn't just interpersonal, but it's like love for and passion. So it's like, you could even take love and mean, I want to win the World Cup. It's like you have passion and you have these fifth dimensional capabilities that other creatures don't have. And I feel like if you just looked at humans in isolation from nature, that wouldn't seem so wonderful because we all have it.
So is that your answer?
I say, yeah. So I'm going to go with
some vague thing about love and
To care and be cared for is our purpose.
You think?
Mm-hmm. I believe.
You believe? I like that word. That's nice. What do you think is the kind of collective answer to this question right now of our generation? Because I think it's rather a hedonistic one.
I think it's a bit hedonistic. Yeah, it's to leave an impact, I would say, to leave the world better than you found it.
I think it's more like to have fun.
Yeah.
To enjoy yourself.
I can see that.
Like, I think we're very into the pleasures of the world.
Yeah, but I feel like it's very externally motivated, as you're saying. So I feel like, yeah, it's not as... I learned what cynicism is. I always thought it was like pessimism, but it's not just that. It's just self-motivated, like, I want to do this for me kind of thing, but not in a hedonistic way of like, I want to do this because it feels good. It's just like, I want to do this because what I've gathered from all of the inputs in my life is that this is the right thing to do. And you don't want to have fame, you don't want to have renown, whereas the hedonistic view is a bit more about, yeah, like having status and having joy and things. It's a very materialistic view of why we exist.
You think that's the predominant view right now?
Yeah, to perhaps accumulate enough wealth or experiences to either pass on to future generations or to just feel fulfilled. Like, yeah, I am obsessed with travel, so I'm gonna travel and travel and travel until I feel like I have kind of accomplished something and overcome perhaps where I was born.
It's a little bit distracting. Hopefully you can, or maybe hopefully you can't hear the celebratory stink chariot horns outside after the World Cup win, but celebratory or just angry, they all sound the same. That's the funny thing about car horns.
Yeah.
But yeah, with regards to this question, I also think it's pertinent to the Solacene because having some kind of a collective answer, or at least a consensus, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but like pulling in the same general direction, I think is important to kind of align the species-wide, the collective human efforts and imaginations and hopes in a somewhat similar, or at least not opposite direction. That's why it's important for the Solacene. So having like a noble answer to this question, even if it's just like very, very broad, like like what you just said about love and being, it's like that's just kind of an answer. But it's like having some answer like that is what I'm saying.
Yeah, whereas right now I feel like it's either progress or love, which I feel like, in my opinion, they're very different. So if we're pulling in those two directions, then it's going to end up with a very divided society.
Yes. So I was pondering this question for like a week. And then 2 days ago, we had our first snowfall, really, in Montreal. I mean, we've had some snow over the previous weeks, but this was the first time it was like everything's white. And it was a pleasant snowfall. I don't know how to explain it logically, but it's like some snowfalls you can tell people are upset about and some people are happy about. And I think it's largely to do with, is it the 100th of the season or is it the first? If it's the first, people are generally happier because the kids, it's like, it's their first snow day and it's like, it's not an annoyance yet. But anyway, I was walking around in the park and it was just full of children and their families all making snowmen. There were literally like 50 or 60 that I could see. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about snowmen and I was like, this, and everyone was having, like, it was a joyous time. And I was like, these are in some way connected to this question, I think. Snowmen. Because I was like, why do we make these? Why is this? We don't really, you never really question it. It's like, well, that's what you do with snow. You make men out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really funny, and how it's almost instinctive to children. As soon as it, in Frozen, it's like, do you want to make a snowman? And that's another thing. I feel like people rarely want to do it. Kids, I mean, some of them probably have to, but when given the choice, people would often rather do it with other people.
It's true.
And the other thing I was just observing about it with regards to my own snowman building history, the storied history of my snowman army, is that the actual finished product is always kind of secondary, a distant second. It's the making of it, it's the joy.
Yes.
And even the hope of it, like even the image of it, when you wake up, you're like, I'm going to make a snowman. And that is even, in some senses, better than the actual making of it. But both of those are significantly better than just the looking at it after.
Yeah,
it's like,
for sure.
Well, we made this. Now
it's the
what?
same as
Now
almost
let's make
every other
another one.
snowman.
Yeah, they
there
all look
you go.
exactly the same. Can't find any rocks. That kind of, like I can't finish it.
How many carrots? You have to use a potato for the nose, but it's like it's fine. It's an experience.
Have to use a pickle.
Think that's really getting to it.
Yeah,
the
snowman.
answer,
I know,
because it's like there's the joy seeking, the thrill seeking. That's so much different than building a snowman. That's more about the creation, as you say, the process,
yeah,
the relations, and the dream.
Yeah.
Whereas the other thing, it's like it's about the dream, but then it's just kind of a hedonic treadmill. Whereas with this, it's like when you build a snowman, you say you build another one, but you're happy. You're like, that was a lovely experience. I'm gonna go drink hot chocolate, warm up, go about my day.
I was so because of this, I wanted to find some research into why we make snowmen, because that really is interesting to me. We make sand castles, snowmen, that kind of thing. It's like we make our houses and ourselves.
Yeah.
I think there's something philosophical in there that I'm not like haven't applied myself to fully, and probably just not smart enough to properly wrap my head around the fact that this stuff comes from the ground. It's a pure blanket. It's it covers what is so often quite ugly by the end of fall. Like the ground is not looking nice, and it's very kind of dappled green, brown, black grays, and the white just makes everything just untouched. And then we get in there, and the first thing we do is form ourselves in it. Yeah. There's something to that anyway. So I was looking at the history of it, and what I found was no distinct origin, but this funny mention in like a 13th century Dutch book of this really sad-looking snowman. Reminded me a little bit of Olaf from Frozen, because he's depicted right beside a fire, and also in the text is some reference to the crucifixion of Christ. Yeah, so I was like, maybe in some way we are reenacting our religious epics in the snow from a young age.
It will melt.
I'm not sure. And the melting, that's something interesting, isn't it? Because it's always... Were you actually sad when your snowman melted?
No.
Really?
Not really. I remember one winter we tried to build the epic snowman, like the 10-foot tall. We were getting the parents involved and hoisting the balls on top of each other. That one, when it kind of was blown down by the wind, I remember being sad about.
But for the most part, it's not that tragic, is it?
No.
And I think that maybe it also, it's this idea of like the death cycle from a young age. Immediately you're becoming attuned to it. I don't know if I'm looking too much into this, but there's something to that. DW's Snowball.
Yes.
There's an episode of Arthur, one of the most iconic, I might say.
For sure.
Where DW tries to freeze a snowball all year. And it's like, that's unnatural, DW. Dora, just let it melt. A new one will come every year. But something about how I was kind of tongue-in-cheek about the religious thing, but like we're learning about ourselves through nature, through the world, as it literally falls down from the sky. From a young age, we're modeling something recognizable out of that. And somehow connecting our identity to that of the earth. Yeah. I don't know if this sounds preposterous or obvious, one of those two things.
Yeah.
Like I might be trying to make it sound too profound.
Yeah,
but that's how I feel about it.
Why not get profound about the snow? Snow is a profound experience.
Yeah. So my kind of roundabout answer to the question of like the point of humans through the snowman metaphor is that I think the point of the species is answerable in the question of the individual, like what I was saying about the earlier. You said you think it's distinct. I think the question about the species is mainly just an amalgam of the question that everybody asks themselves and how to align our lives. And so it's like the point of the species is kind of for each person to figure out the point of themselves. That's kind of what I was getting at.
I like that.
Which is not really an answer at all, but...
No, but that makes a lot of sense, to find their own religion, find their own purpose, find their own path. And if we're trying to make everyone the exact same, then that's a failure on our part as a society.
But why do you think we make snowmen? Is it about building? Is it about beautifying? Is it about vanity? Is it about looking for a friend? Bubble buddy?
I think it's just about adding something to the list of things to do. Like a couple weeks ago, you were talking about we walk, we eat, we commune. I feel like build a snowman. Like it's like a thing on the to-do list. Yeah. Build something. Do something with the snow.
I was toying with my answer to this question just being point of the humans is just to do without doing harm. Yeah. It's like how much can you do without doing harm? Yeah. I think from an environmental point of view, you can maybe talk about the species like that.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Because the thing with snowmen, what I was thinking about it, and sand also, it's such a, like, it's so kind of immaterial.
Yeah.
It's like you look at snow, it's kind of infinite when you look out at a field, so you don't really mind about using however much snow.
That's a really
and also
good point,
it just always comes back.
Yeah.
And whatever you do with it, it will just melt and it'll be fine. And the same with sand, the wave will just come in and it'll be fine.
Renewable art supplies.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It's not like you're using plastic or something. You're using something that's just going to melt.
Yeah, you're not even using paper and pencil. Like, yeah, that's really cool.
There was also the thing about in Florence, like Michelangelo was tasked with making this big... There's a lot of snowman lore. You should look into it. It's quite an interesting history.
This is not something I thought about. I guess I just thought... I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't.
No one thinks about it. It's just like, well, they're snowmen.
Yeah.
It's like, well, where did that come from?
There's snow angels. We just lay down and...
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Getting really biblical with this.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also this story about this one town, I want to say it was in Belgium, where it was like they made hundreds of snowmen as like a political protest or something in the 1500s. I don't know. Look into it. Snowmen well.
Okay. Sounds good. And something else we wanted to talk about this week is waste, as we were kind of alluding to with the snowmen, the most infinite of art supplies. Again, this is a question of why are we talking about waste in the nature semester, and I think it came again out of a question of like when you're camping, what do you do with your waste, all of this stuff. And I think we'll definitely have like an infrastructure series where we talk a bit more about waste, a bit more about roads and these things.
Sure.
But I wanted to talk about waste in the nature semester, mainly in the context of plastic, which is the polar opposite of nature. And
do you think?
Yes.
Even though it comes from nature. Did you know that? Did you know that plastic comes from nature? I wouldn't say it's naturally occurring, but
yeah, I'm saying it's the complete opposite of nature is plastic, because it has so many negative impacts. It is almost like we recycle it, but not really.
Yeah, we don't really recycle it.
No.
I think that's one thing that I learned about this week. Also, I was shamefully ignorant about recycling in general, let me put it like that, before this week researching. And I have to say, it wasn't entirely through lack of trying, because I have tried to wrap my head around recycling before. Yeah. But I feel like in some cases it is deliberately obtuse.
100%. I was trying to find like breakdowns of like how it works for each material.
Nice.
It doesn't really, it's just like, well, they take it, they sort it, they wash it. It's like, but how is it like transformed into something new?
Well, with like metal, that's very obvious.
They melt it, they reshape it.
With compost, that's very obvious as well.
Yeah.
Compost piles in the Solacene, that's a form of recycling. Yeah. How common?
I think there'd be community compost piles.
Yeah.
I think waste management in the Solacene will be a lot of reduce, reuse, recycle kind of situation. But compost will always have food waste. But yeah, community compost piles, so where it is. It's then used just for the local farming initiatives and so on. And then there just won't be garbage piles. Everything that's produced in the Solacene will either be recyclable or reusable. But it's even if you're making metal containers to buy your food in and so on, there'll come a point where it's just needs to be made into something else.
Yes.
But everything will be circular.
2 things.
Yeah, what else?
One of my high school teachers had the largest individual compost pile in the province.
Really?
Yeah, in Canada or in Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I was thinking about in our apartment building that we used to live in, which probably had 100 or 200 different suites in it, maybe.
Yeah.
The waste was all just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is ridiculous. Because it even had a chute. They even had garbage chutes.
Mm-hmm.
You could just throw down your compost chutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And for that to be in a city so kind of big and developed as Montreal, I was like, this is damning. Because food is so easy to recycle. I understand it with plastic and even paper, but food is just so simple.
Recycling, we rely on it way too much, and it causes us to consume unconsciously because it's it just can be recycled. Almost everything that we have here that we throw in the garbage is it goes in the recycling. There's very little that goes in the actual to go to a landfill bin. And I think because of that, we don't think about it because it's just all paper. And it's true, it can all be recycled, but it's it's not helping the cause, I don't think.
Which do you think is, well, because a lot of it just gets thrown out anyway, but that's another conversation. But which do you think is the most important of the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra that you mentioned?
Reduce.
Reduce is like up here.
Yeah.
And reuse is like down here, and recycle is a little bit lower than that. Reduce is just, it's just so much more important than the other two. That is something I don't think is drilled into our heads in school when we're being taught about how actually you can stitch your Kool-Aid bags into one big purse or into a jacket. It's like, no one's going to do this. How about we just stop drinking Kool-Aid?
Yeah, exactly.
Literally and figuratively. How about we stop drinking the Kool-Aid?
Yeah. So I think reduce, number one, just by such a long shot. And the reusing, like, you can reuse your plastic bag for a bunch of different reasons, but it will eventually break down. In the process, you're going to end up with a bunch of microplastics in your bloodstream and your water. And then at the end, it's going to just be in the landfill. Like, it's just kind of postponing it. And because if you have this mindset of like, oh, well, I can reuse all these plastic bags I get from the grocery store, you're never going to refuse. Like, that's another one that they've got. There's like 7 R's.
I like that one.
It's like reduce, refuse. There's like 7. But
really?
I don't know them.
Return?
Return, maybe.
Maybe we should come up with a mantra next week.
For the Solacene?
Yeah.
The waste management mantra of the Solacene.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it might just be reduce, reduce, reduce. But in any case, maybe we can think about that. But it's just like there's so much arguing about the merits and demerits of all the different materials. It's like plastic, but what about this new biodegradable components? And it's like, blah, blah. It's like, why don't we just stop wrapping bananas individually?
Yeah.
They already come wrapped in that yellow thing. So I think whether it be cotton for clothes, whether it be plastic, whether it be glass, paper, wood, whatever, we should just
reduce.
Yeah, reduce.
Yeah. I learned about this concept. This is for the ecotourism question, but I'll talk about it now. It's called disaster capitalism, which is when industries are built off of issues made by the system kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as we've said before, we're not like anti-capitalism, but I think it's kind of in this weird
disaster capitalism is pure late stage capitalism by the sounds of it. So like,
exactly.
So like plastic straws is a prime example of disaster capitalism, because it's like, we shouldn't be having these cups from fast food places that we need to it's like, why do we need straws anyway? You're an adult.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, well, we're actually going to make an industry of where we make reusable banana holders. It's like, we just don't need them.
Or paper straws.
Paper
it's
straws?
Like, why do we need them at all?
Even like the cotton bags industry, it's like that's worse for the environment than the plastic bags were, because we don't use them. We just lose them. Or they end up in the garbage, or they end up whatever. And we just need to rethink how we consume things.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like food is so simple because we're not that far removed from when you just go to the store, say I need 2 kilograms of this, 1 kilogram of this, and I'll take 5 apples, and you just put it all in your own sacks or whatever and take it home. Like, that wasn't that long ago.
Well, think about milk.
Yeah.
Think about how the milkman used to come, drop the glass milks off, milk
pick
bottles.
Pick up the empty ones.
Pick up the empty ones, rinse them, refill them. It's like, if a company proposed that today, or a government, everyone would be like, wow, this is the future. Wow, this is so innovative. It's like, that's just what it was before every profit became slashable because of, I mean, you know, every cost became slashable because of plastic is so much cheaper. Exactly.
When I was watching a bunch of videos on recycling, trying to get to the bottom of it, it kept using these examples of companies. Like, one of them was a soap company who uses 100% post-consumer plastic. And it was like, they create 50,000 bottles of soap every year, all using recycled plastic. And I'm like, well, but why do we need these bottles in the first place? Like, the cool thing would be you make it, you put it in these glass crafts or these like tin crafts that can be sanitized, and like, I also think because things are so big, the sanitation standards have to be so high. And like, I think that's good. Like, it's good for public health, but it's just like, if things were smaller scale, you wouldn't need as many preservatives, you wouldn't need all the packaging and everything, because it's just like, you would know, okay, the soap's coming from 3 towns over. Like, it doesn't need to be in packaging because it's only going to be in transit for 2 days before it gets to my home.
Well, I just think about how like 50% of things that are sold just don't need to exist, period. Like, I was reading about how bacteria is evolving because of how much antibacteria stuff we've been using. Yeah. It's like, that doesn't sound great, but I don't want to sound too conspiratorial on this episode. But another thing, so let's talk about plastic. It's like, you were talking about the local food. Something like bacon from a supermarket can survive for like a month because it's so wrapped in the plastic.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't in there, it would not last as long, and that's the case for many foods. So this is why plastic is adopted so widely across the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we can talk about how in Montreal it would be nice if we could just go to the local tear shop, bring our own Tupperware, get the bacon from there, and there'd be no plastic involved. But I was looking at like ocean plastic, and the 5 biggest countries in terms of like sheer amount, not even per capita, but just like amount higher than the US or anything like that, are the Philippines, India, Malaysia, China, and Indonesia. Those are like the top 5 biggest plastic polluters in the ocean. And a large part of that is because of food. Mm-hmm. Which is like, that's how they get their food, single-use plastic. Mm-hmm. So I think this is kind of an example of when people talk about how increasing economic affluence, is one of the ways to fast track environmental affluence in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because it's like, we can't afford food that isn't wrapped in plastic because it would be randomly $8 for an apple. And that's what I was getting at with this soap company, is because it was talking about how it's like kind of a fancy soap company. So it probably costs like $10 a bottle. And therefore, even with this post-consumer plastic, the average person will still buy the $1 virgin plastic bottle because it's affordable. And so, yeah, definitely like inequality is a big part of it. Mm-hmm. But just like it needs to be top down. Otherwise, it's going to I don't think it's going to get better if it's not top down, or like top down or grassroots. But if it's this kind of weird, like, well, there's these companies popping up, these mid-range companies who are sustainable, they're always going to be cutting corners. So we shouldn't be allowed to cut corners, basically.
Also, everyone's favorite topic, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. What do you know about that? Not
much.
Well, I learned a study recently found that roughly 75% of it, 75 to 85%, so our lowball, comes from fishing debris.
Really?
Yeah, like nets and ropes and stuff.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So it's like, I feel like we don't hear much about that.
No, we hear about us throwing our bottle caps into the ocean.
And also, I think that's awful. Like, I do think there's a consumer responsibility, but I also think there's so many big industries that aren't regulated to the extent that they should be. That it almost, I don't think it does, but I can see why in some people's eyes it makes a mockery of like protests about plastic bags at grocery stores.
It's true. Yeah, it makes a mockery of, I was talking about we need to change our sunscreen because it's killing coral reefs. But it's like, you know what else is killing coral reefs?
Oil spills.
Exactly. And Dawn dish soap, you're not doing enough.
Even though they clean them, right? Clean the birds with the dish soap. That's what I find amazing. What?
The plastic bottles made out of oil.
Have you ever cleaned yourself with the dish soap?
My hands, yeah.
No, I mean...
No.
If you were to, which color? I'd go for the purple.
I always like the purple dish soap.
They have flavors, But did you know that?
Like taste flavors?
Well, they all have names. It'll be like...
Yeah, it's like green apple.
Right.
I always get the lavender because I like how it smells.
Is that what the purple is?
Yeah. Yeah.
So why not use it on ourselves?
I just think it's bad for your skin. Okay. It strips all the oils.
Okay.
And also, if you get it in your mouth over too much time, it will hurt you.
Next question?
Yeah, the next question is, what is ecotourism and how will that mutate in the Solacene?
Speaking of mutations, though.
Speaking of plastic.
Oh.
The organism of the week is the humble Eidionellus sacchenensis, which is a single-celled organism.
Okay, is it one that consumes plastic?
Yeah.
Hey, I got it.
So it is nicknamed PETAs, PETAs, because PET is the polyethanol, like it's the name for plastic. And so it can digest plastic, turn it into energy for its survival, and then just into organic compounds. And then often in nearby like plastic recycling facilities is where they originally discovered these. So this guy kind of like captures it, and then all the other enzymes and things in the soil will like then use those things that he's captured, and they'll turn it into more and more organic, and they disperse it. So he can eat it 30 times faster than average. So it's like if you had soil that was really populated with these, and you threw a plastic bottle in it, and it would degrade 30 times faster than if you threw it into non-PETAs soil. It's gram-negative, aerobic, rod-shaped, and motile, so it has a single flagellum. I just did a quick little single-celled organism
Let me describe it. It looks vaguely... Okay, so it kind of looks like there's some food on an oblong plate with a tail that makes it look, I suppose, vaguely spermatozoic.
Yeah, well, similar. I mean, it's just a single cell, so it has the nucleus, it has the mitochondria, all that jazz.
We don't need you to go through your 9th grade Golgi body explanation.
Oh, there's the Gojalies in there. So that's the organism of the week. Thank you, Pedes, for sponsoring this video.
Ribosomes.
Ribosomes, yeah.
What do you think about like all these... Like, this is an example, but when people talk about, oh, there's this plastic-eating farm, or like there's this startup that has this new material that's is made from... You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I just think that's not great. It's like, I like innovation, but I just think it needs to be pulling in the same direction and not trying to make money.
I think it should be structural innovation. This is what you were talking about, disaster capitalism. It's like, we're going to design this new material.
Well, I mean, yeah, like the oil companies, they basically were like, oh, shoot, everyone's switching to electric cars. We need a new industry. Vegan plastic. So they just start making... Or vegan leather. So they start making vegan leather couches, vegan leather clothes.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Oh.
GME,
so
I think.
Basically, it just means plastic.
Yeah, just plastic things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I had those vegan leather shoes, remember?
Yeah, they're just plastic.
Yeah, they
and there is vegan leather, but like that's not... I'm probably speaking is slightly outdated, but as of like 6 to 8 months ago, it was still very like... If you actually got a genuine vegan leather bag made out of mushrooms, it would be like $300. Like, it's not the things you're getting at H&M marketed as vegan leather.
I feel like plastic. You are annoying the vegans, turning off one of our main demographics on this.
Annoying the vegans?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, it's still better than, like, everyone walking around with cow shoes, but it's just like...
With shoe cows? That would be awful. Anyway, ecotourism. Yeah. So, what is ecotourism? What is it?
Ecotourism is about uniting conservation, communities, and sustainable travel.
Yeah, so I basically had this misconception. I thought ecotourism was just nature-based travel.
Well, it was originally that. It evolved and mutated, and now it's just a greenwashing technique.
You're all about mutations today, aren't you?
Yeah.
Shoe cows. Shoes are mutated to moo.
Yeah.
Mutation. Oh.
Oh, heavens.
But ecotourism, at its purest, at its finest, at its most Solacene, is about travel that also incorporates giving back in some way to the nature that you're going to see. So it's not just about I'm going to the Great Barrier Reef to take some photos.
Yeah.
It's about I'm going to the Great Barrier Reef. I'm going to help try and restore in some way or conserve what should be so beautiful and natural.
So ecotourism at its most finest, as you say, is slow. It's, okay, I'm going to go visit this country I've never visited before. But I'm not just visiting for 3 days to get the experience. I'm going to go for a few months, learn a bit of the language, learn the local culture. It's a bit slower. And tourism at its core, just as like an industry, has always been defined by the desire to go somewhere and be set apart from other tourists, not be a tourist. It's like that's just the top thing when it's defining a tourist.
What do you mean?
It's like, okay, I want to go to... We just went to Italy, so it's like, what makes you a tourist versus like someone who's just moved there is that you want to not be a tourist. That you want to go and you want to have authentic experiences. You want to have fun. You want to like just be part of the local culture. Like you don't want to just be a tourist. Which would mean to me like to be a tourist, like you don't want to just go and take pictures. You don't want to just you don't want to stand out and like dress different. Like you want to immerse yourself in the culture. So, like, ecotourism is genuine, is, like, meeting that need of, like, choosing to go and immerse yourself in the culture, whereas when we go for a week, it's, like, you desire that, but you're not going to have any catharsis and, like, feel like that desire has been met when you leave.
Okay.
So then you keep going back and you keep traveling, and it's
it's a more comprehensive experience of the place when you travel there. But what I was talking about was that at its purest, it involves some form of work.
Yes, ecotourism.
Some form of effort. Ecotourism does.
Yeah.
Whereas most, I'm just going to go see some churches or some ruins.
Don't.
Yeah.
You're just on vacation. Like you're in vacation mode.
Where are some places that you would like to see just for their nature? What's like the top 2?
I'd like to see New Zealand. And I'd like to see somewhere really, really cold. So Antarctica or Greenland or something.
The top 3, quote unquote, ecotourism destinations. New Zealand, Indonesia, And
Indonesia, really?
Yeah. Well, a lot of young people go there, don't they? And they stay in a treehouse hut and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I see.
And I'll go, I think it's, I'll just group it as Central America.
Yeah.
There's like Costa Rica and a lot of different places like that.
Yeah, kind of rainforesty experiences. Okay.
It's a global market of over $180 billion US every year.
Yeah. And a big issue with ecotourism that I've learned about is that when it kind of picked up, like when the phrase was coined kind of thing, we realized that it's a thing that people wanted. People wanted to go whitewater rafting. They wanted to go hiking in the mountains. Local people started trying to like create these experiences to facilitate, oh, you can come and stay on a farm. You can come and stay like in these
tree houses,
yeah. But then they weren't doing super well because they weren't consulting with the tourists. They were just like, oh, this is an experience that's authentic, that it's like going to help the community grow. It's going to help us. It's going to be nice and like mutual. But then the people who, like the early adopters of ecotourism, then swooped in. They're like, I'm going to make these tree houses to stay in, but they're going to obviously be all English speaking. They're going to all have like pretty Western food. And then it becomes very capitalist and not grassroots. It's like the people who are then benefiting are third party. They're not the local people. And with ecotourism in the Solacene, I think it'll be very grassroots. It'll just be like, it'll be very mutual. It won't just be, I'm going to go stay on this resort. And the people who run it are also from the country that I'm from. It's like the people who run it will be the people who live there, I think.
Why do you think ecotourism is popular?
Well, mainly, I think there's this thing called extinction tourism, which has always been a thing. Like, we go to see museums because these are extinct civilizations. But nowadays, it's like, I'm pretty sure 90% of people probably going to Venice are saying, well, I just want to see it before it's gone.
Yeah, but I'm talking about ecotourism.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I think it has a lot to do with, like, wanting to capture nature before it's gone, or go to places, because, like, we live in a city. It's like, there's no nature here. I want to go capture an experience of nature.
I'd want to be outside, in other words.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I think. And I'm like, I don't think there should be $180 billion USD market per year. I think in the Solacene, which is what we talk about on the show, conversation, podcast, whatever, not everybody will live in like a loud, stink chariot filled, stinky, grey, geometric city.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm going to go outside.
Yeah.
I don't have to go to Costa Rica though. I'm literally just going to go outside.
Yeah.
And how nice is that? Like, that's what it is. That's basically what it is. We've outsourced it, and like we've paved paradise. So now we have to take a flight to get there.
Yeah. I mean, there's the saying, don't like create a life you don't need a vacation from, but I'm going to extend it to create an environment you don't need a vacation from.
No, yeah, exactly.
So it's like you can just go to the environment. Like, you can just go to nature and not have to like travel to nature.
I mean, there's always going to be like landmarks. Not every place has a Great Barrier Reef, and not every place looks like
or oceans.
New Zealand or whatever.
Yeah.
So I understand that. Like, I'm going to make a pilgrimage here. I would love to climb a mountain. I want to hit the Pacific. Never been to the Pacific. Yeah. Never dipped my toe in the Mediterranean. Never seen a desert. Never seen a tree like this. Never seen a koala. It's like, that makes sense. But I think so much of it is often just like, wow, it feels nice to be outside. Like, we did that to an extent when we went to
100%.
When we went to Europe and we were like walking around kind of rural Italy and Tuscany and stuff, we were like, isn't this lovely because of all the green and blue?
Yeah, and just be outside 8 hours a day.
Yeah, but it's like untouched North America was also very green and blue. We just don't have it anymore.
Yeah, 100%. And
not that Tuscany is untouched, but I just mean,
Yeah, it's just different. And like, yeah, we're trying to like charge up our batteries with these little trips, but it's like our batteries shouldn't be depleted, and these trips should be just another addition to our well-being. Like, our well-being should be good. It shouldn't be reliant on these other places or these experiences.
We did an episode about tourism, and we basically said the same thing, that in the Solacene, more places will have cool architecture,
cool museums,
whatever. So we won't always have, and of course Venice will always be Venice. So like, there will still be people going there, but it won't be that that's the only place that you can find concentrated beauty, in a sense. And it's the same way, I think, with ecotourism. Yeah. And also what you said about being outside, like, that sounds ridiculous, but people, when they are traveling on vacation, especially on some kind of ecotourism or nature-based travel, that's the most they'll be outside for the year or for the decade.
Yeah, I listened to this podcast about anthropologists, and then this guy who's his podcast is called The End of Tourism. So like you can check it out if you want. But this episode, he was talking about how people like us, like environmentalists and activists of all kinds, like, well, I want to go see the Great Barrier Reef to be inspired. And it's like, your flight there is going to have a net negative. Like, it's just going to be a net negative. So, like, if you ever have these pilgrimages, like, if you really want to, like, make it as sustainable as possible in your transportation. And I think just, like, check yourself kind of thing. Like, I tried to do this before I make any decision to travel, because it's like, why am I going? Am I going just to see something that I could basically, like, what will this do for me and what will this do for, like, my life kind of thing? And I think it's very common in this, like, 1% of people who have the ability to travel extensively. It's like, they just kind of do it for the sake of it, and they don't think it through very much. And they go 3 times a year to different places, and yeah, it's just having a net negative on the environment.
You know what I think we should talk about next week? Have we talked about pets a little bit on the nature semester? I feel like we touched on it, but I think
I went in my dog rant, but...
Dog rant, yeah, but we should do like a bigger episode on pets.
Yeah, the pet episode.
Pet worms, having that one kid who has like a worm. Mm-hmm. What's it called?
An ant farm? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah. I'm starting to think you're forming one, because you keep saying, Alicia, an ant. And I never see these ants, but I think you're collecting them and you're going to have a little ant farm.
In my pocket.
Yeah. But yeah, pets, it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Pets and nature, and pets and bringing nature inside. Could we also talk about houseplants?
Yeah, houseplants are just very lazy pets.
Yes.
So let's talk about that next week.
I love it. Thanks
for listening, everybody. Hope you have a great week. If you liked the episode, please give a review or whatever. Subscription, something like that.
Yeah, share it with people.
Bye.